The phone rang in sunny California, but what came through was anything but warm. Prince Harry, thousands of miles from the royal gates he once called home, answered the call expecting a conversation. Instead he got closure. "I had no choice," said King Charles in a voice colder than the crown itself. In that moment Harry didn't fight back. He wept. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a final severing of royal bloodlines. No room left for return, no words left to heal. And now the world is asking what truth forced a father to break his own son. Unexpected call from across the pond. The California sun was shining, but the mood inside Harry's Montecito home quickly darkened. It was supposed to be a routine call, something brief, something familiar. But from the moment Prince Harry answered and heard his father's voice, everything felt wrong. There was no warmth, no small talk, just silence. And then King Charles spoke the words that would shift their relationship forever. "I had no choice, Harry." Those 5 words hit harder than any headline ever had. Harry didn't respond. He couldn't for a moment. All he could do was stare at the floor, phone pressed to his ear, eyes already starting to water. It wasn't what was said, it was how it was said. Final, cold, like the ending of a book they never got to ride together. The room around him seemed to blur. Meghan, standing nearby, sensed the shift immediately. She approached, trying to understand what had just happened, but Harry couldn't speak. He sat down slowly, as if his legs could no longer hold the weight of what he had just heard. Tears began to fall, not out of anger, but heartbreak. After all the damage, all the distance, Harry had held on to one thing, hope, that despite everything a piece of his family still remained intact. But that hope vanished in a single moment. Across the ocean, Charles had chosen a sterile phone call over a heartfelt reunion. There was no explanation, no discussion. Just the devastating phrase hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. "I had the choice." And with that, whatever bridge still stood between Harry and the crown collapsed. The call ended, but its echoes hadn't. And from that point forward, nothing between father and son would ever be the same again. 5 words that changed everything. "I had no choice, Harry." The 5 words continue to ring in royal corridors, whispered in media circles, and dissected by commentators who have covered this family for decades. It wasn't just a message, it was a verdict. And for Harry, it was the final blow. He didn't reply right away. He couldn't. Those words didn't open a conversation, they ended one. According to palace insiders, such abrupt language from the monarch is rare, almost unprecedented in royal tradition. Even the harshest decisions are coated in diplomacy. But this was cold, surgical, unapologetic. Experts now say the brevity was deliberate. Charles didn't want to leave space for debate. No soft tones, no "I understand" or "this is difficult," just a phrase that sounded like a locked door. "I had no choice." And for Harry, who's spent years struggling with identity, loyalty, and trauma, that sentence wasn't just painful, it was shattering. He reportedly repeated the words out loud after the call, trying to make sense of them. Meghan, standing beside him, said nothing. There was nothing to say. The message was clear. The crown had made up its mind. There would be no return, no role, no second chance. For Harry, it was the moment all those years of tension finally crystallized into something irreversible. His childhood memories, his sense of belonging, his royal legacy cut off with a single phrase. Even tabloids that once mocked him now ran headlines with rare sympathy. The coldest goodbye. No choice, no son, the call that ended everything. And perhaps that's exactly what those 5 words were meant to do, not soften the blow or drive the point home. There would be no more room for Harry in the House of Windsor, and that truth would define his path from this moment forward. Harry's emotional collapse. The tears didn't stop Prince Harry, a man who had held it together through his mother's death, through public disgrace, through relentless media assault. Finally broke. And it didn't happen on a royal stage, it happened in the quiet privacy of his California home, where Meghan stood by helplessly watching a man unravel. He didn't scream, he didn't throw anything, he just cried silently at first. Then with his hands over his face, trying to block out the weight of what he had just heard from his father. I had no choice. Those 5 words had undone on him. This wasn't just sadness, it was something deeper, a lifetime of buried emotions, years of unresolved conflict, silent disappointment, unanswered questions, the emotional wall Harry had built to survive it all, finally cracked. Meghan approached slowly, wrapped her arms around him and whispered, "It's going to be okay." But even she knew this wasn't just another bad call from London. This was a cut-off. Sources close to the couple say Harry didn't speak for nearly an hour after the call. He just sat in silence, I read. Heartbroken, he had always hoped for a way back. Maybe not to the palace, but to the people inside it. That hope, however, had just been killed by the man he still called Dad. The press, sensing something seismic, began circling the story, leaked quickly. Within hours, Harry's tearful state became global news. Paparazzi photos of him looking dazed, distant, only fueled the headlines. But the truth behind those eyes wasn't political. It was personal. It wasn't about titles or inheritance. It was about being a son and realizing your father had chosen the crown over you, and in that moment, for the first time since his exit, Harry was in the rebel royal. He was just a man mourning the family he could no longer reach, cutting the ties. Final family decision. The rumors had circled for years, but now King Charles had made it official. Prince Harry was no longer part of the future royal structure, and unlike previous half measures this time, it was permanent. Palace insiders are calling it a clean break, not just from royal duties, but from any potential return. No titles restored, no ceremonial appearances, no secret talks about reintegration. This was closure, cold, final, and irreversible. At the heart of it all, that chilling phrase, "I had no choice." Though no official statement named specific consequences, it has confirmed what many feared. Harry's role had been erased from inside the monarchy. That could mean a formal removal from the line of succession, a total loss of royal security privileges, and perhaps even legal distance from crown-funded support. The message was simple: Harry is out entirely. Some royal commentators suggest this final message was something Charles had delayed for years, out of love, out of hope, no one knows. But whatever held him back, it's gone now. And while aides insist the king did this out of duty, not malice, the result is the same: the cutting of a family cord that may never be tied again. Past tensions reignite, the wounds were never fully healed, and now they've been ripped open all over again. Long before King Charles said those 5 words, the divide between him and Prince Harry had been quietly growing. But it was the Oprah interview that ignited the fuse, and emotional, explosive sit-down that laid bare the secrets of the House of Windsor. Charles insiders say never truly recovered from the public fallout, the allegations, the emotion, the exposure. He felt blindsided, betrayed, exposed. And now in the echo of that unforgettable interview comes this final act, a message that closes the door Harry left open. This isn't just about security or royal titles, it's about trust, about a father who felt humiliated on the world stage, and a son who felt unheard his entire life. Now that emotional Cold War has turned into a permanent fracture, and as the world watches, and stunned silence, both sides remain bound by blood, but broken beyond repair. Security or legal clause? What's behind it? As the fallout from King Charles, his final message deepens, one question now dominates royal circles. What forced him to say, "I had no choice"? Was it truly emotion or something written in law? Insiders are now pointing to something far more complex than personal betrayal. Legal constraints possibly tied to succession, security clearance, or crown finances may have left Charles with no real room to maneuver. Whispers inside the palace suggest a possible breach, one connected to Prince Harry's current affiliations in the US. Reports say Crown lawyers flagged Harry's international business ventures, media deals, and public disclosures as possible risks to the monarchy's confidential structure. One senior aide even hinted there may have been something buried in the fine print of his departure that became a legal trigger. Could do no choice, Charles spoke of, actually be tied to a constitutional clause, a rule within royal governance that forced action if a former royal crosses certain boundaries. Others believe it could relate to security access, with Harry once holding privileged information, now living overseas, married to an American citizen, and openly speaking to media outlets. Did that create a potential threat to classified royal protocol? Of course, nothing is confirmed, no documents have surfaced, but the silence from both Buckingham Palace and Kensington only feeds the fire. If there was a legal component behind this decision, it explains why Charles sounded less like a father and more like a man following orders he didn't write. And if that's true, if duty wasn't just emotional but legal, then the words "I had no choice" become more than personal heartbreak. They become evidence of a monarchy protecting itself at any cost. The question now isn't just whether Charles wanted to push Harry out, it's whether he was legally bound to do so. And if so, what else might be waiting to surface? Harry's plea, memories, and final wishes. The phone call hadn't even ended before Prince Harry began pleading, not as a duke, not as a former royal, but as a son. Sources close to Harry reveal he invoked his childhood memories, those rare quiet moments he shared with his father before the weight of the crown came between them. He reminded Charles of their walks at Balmoral, the private fishing trips, the times he clung to him after Diana's death. Charles didn't respond, not warmly, not at all. What broke Harry most was not just the decision, but the absence of any emotion behind it. So he tried again. This time he referenced the Queen. Her final wishes, her belief in unity, her dream that somehow one day the family would come back together. Still nothing. Insiders say Harry's voice cracked as he asked his father if this was what the late Queen would have wanted, if she would have approved of cutting ties completely with her grandson. Charles remained firm and worse, silent. That silence was more painful than anger, because it told Harry that not even legacy, not even the ghost of his grandmother, could stop what had already been decided. One source close to the family shared he wasn't just begging for his place in the monarchy, he was begging for a piece of the family he thought he still had. That desperate plea wrapped in memories fell on deaf ears, and in that moment, the emotional distance between Harry and his father became a canyon with no bridge. What followed was more than a rejection. It was the end of Harry's last attempt to be part of the family that wants to find his identity. The king's burden. On the surface, King Charles appears calm, resolute, unwavering, but those closest to him say this final message to Prince Harry has come at a steep emotional price. He didn't sleep the night after the call. His aides described him as drained, distant, and deeply burdened. One insider even whispered it broke him. For a man who has spent a lifetime preparing for leadership, Charles now faces the weight of choosing duty over love, and it's showing. Behind the grandeur of his title is a father mourning a son still very much alive, but now beyond his reach. Privately, Charles has expressed sorrow, not for the decision, but for the necessity of it. He reportedly told one aide, "It had to be done. That doesn't make it easier." This wasn't a moment of rage, it was a slow build-up of years. The Oprah interview, the memoir, the press wars, the leaked text. Charles saw each act not as a rebellion, but as an erosion of the very foundation he swore to protect. Now, with a crown firmly in his grasp, he's learning the truth of leadership. It doesn't just cost titles or time, it costs people. And for Charles, the cost has been his son, though he may never see it publicly. Those who know him best leave the words "I had no choice" weren't just for Harry, they were for himself, because sometimes being king means losing what you love most and doing it with a straight face. Palace remains silent. In the chaos that followed the call between King Charles and Prince Harry, the world waited for a response. But the palace gave them nothing, no statement, no denial, just two words from Buckingham press office: no comment. Behind closed doors, however, the scene was anything but calm. Communications teams scrambled to draft responses, only to have them rejected one by one. Aides reportedly worked through the night trying to find a tone that didn't ignite more outrage or seem too cold. But the order from above was clear: silence. And silence in the world of royal media is never empty. It's interpreted, twisted, turned into headlines that speculate what the palace refuses to say. Pundits have already called the silence strategic cowardice. Some say it's a stalling tactic, others argue it's proof the rumors are true. And all the while the public is growing restless. Social media demands answers. Global journalists knock on palace gates with microphones ready. Even former royal staffers are stepping forward, hinting at undisclosed truths and final straws. Meanwhile, Harry remains silent, to which only intensifies the spotlight. Without a clear voice from the palace, speculation has become reality, and the royal family's greatest fear that they're losing control of the narrative may already be happening. The crown has always thrived on mystery, but in today's world, mystery can look like guilt, and silence that looks like confirmation. Global public reaction. The moment the world learned Prince Harry broke down in tears, a tidal wave of emotion followed. From London to Los Angeles, Sydney to South Africa, the public reaction wasn't just intense, it was global. Sympathy surged. People from all walks of life, even those who once mocked Harry, felt a sudden shift. This wasn't drama, this was a man devastated by his father's final words. Social media exploded. "My gosh, Justice for Harry hedged royal fallout, and Pashto no choice no love began trending across continents. Celebrities, activists, and even politicians weighed in, some condemning the monarchy, others simply expressing heartbreak for a son who was cut off. Even traditional royal loyalists began questioning Charles' choice. One commentator said, "When you make your own child cry, you haven't just lost a son, you may have lost the people." International news ran with the story. American morning shows dissected every word of the leaked phone call. European outlets questioned the long-term effects on the Commonwealth. African and Caribbean nations, already distant from the monarchy, spoke openly about how this moment further disconnected the crown from modern values. It was no longer just about Harry, it was about what the monarchy represents. And in that reflection, many didn't see heritage anymore. They saw heartbreak. William, Camilla, and the inner royal circle. As Prince Harry's tears made headlines, a shock rippled far beyond California. It struck the very heart of the monarchy itself. Inside Buckingham Palace, a quiet war was already underway. One not fought with declarations or interviews, but with silent side glances and unspoken allegiances. Prince William has not made a statement, but his silence is now louder than any public defense. Sources close to the palace say he was deeply shaken by the news of Charles' call to Harry, particularly by the cold finality of it. William, despite tensions with his younger brother, never expected a full severing of ties. Their relationship has been strained, yes. But William knows what this kind of fracture means for the monarchy, for the public, for the future of the institution he's destined to inherit. Then there's Queen Camilla. Her name continues to surface, not just as Charles, his partner, but as a powerful influence behind recent royal decisions. Insiders suggest she supported the idea of a full break from Harry, viewing it as necessary to preserve stability. She's been described as from strategic and unbothered by the public fallout. That influence has divided the royal inner circle. Some senior advisors reportedly sided with Charles and Camilla, favoring a leaner, tighter monarchy with fewer risks. But others, long loyal to the late Queen Elizabeth's vision of family first, are quietly resisting. What's emerged behind palace walls is a new kind of tension. Charles's camp versus the traditionalists. And at the center of it all is William, torn between loyalty to his father and the guilt of losing his brother. He's caught in a place no prince wants to be, protecting the monarchy while watching his family fall apart. And as that power struggle simmers, it becomes clearer with each passing day. The throne may be intact, but the family is fractured beyond recognition. Long-term impact on Harry: the call may have lasted only minutes, but its effects will last a lifetime. Prince Harry now finds himself in uncharted territory, not as a royal, not even as a rebel, but as a man officially cut off from the family that once defined him. And that final message from King Charles didn't just end a chapter, it rewrote his entire future. Sources confirm that Harry's role in future royal events is now non-existent. No coronation duties, no formal invites. His removal from succession is being quietly processed behind palace doors. Security arrangements, once debated, are now being re-evaluated without his input. And Harry, he's adjusting, not just emotionally, but publicly. His team has reportedly begun recalibrating his brand. The Aunt Well Foundation is expected to shift focus, leaning harder into mental health, veterans support, and global advice. Tassie. Media deals are being restructured, a new speaking tour may be announced soon. This is no longer a prince on the sidelines, this is a man reinventing himself from the ashes of rejection. But the psychological toll is undeniable. Friends close to him say he's numb, but trying to find purpose. Meghan remains his constant support, though even she knows the magnitude of this moment is beyond anything they expected. And yet Harry is not without strength. He's been through fire before: the loss of his mother, the public breakdown of his family, the press war that nearly swallowed him whole. Now he's stepping into a new identity, fully independent, unbound, but never untouched by the crown. For many, he's becoming a symbol of something greater. A man who chose his mental peace over inherited power. But for Harry, the journey ahead is personal one, where every step forward will echo with the memory of a father's final words: "I had no choice." Final questions and dramatic cliffhanger. Now that the dust is settling, and the echo of "I had no choice" still haunts headlines, one burning question remains: what was the truth that pushed King Charles to cut off his own son? Was it really legal necessity? A risk to national security, a constitutional technicality triggered by foreign residency or business ties, or wasn't something deeper and darker? Some royal watchers believe a final secret yet to be revealed may be at the heart of this decision. A confidential report, a breach, a private act that crossed an invisible line, the kind of truth too explosive to ever go public, but too dangerous to ignore behind the gates of Windsor. And now Prince Harry must decide: does he protect the family that just exiled him, or expose the system that tried to